It's also related to like Cartesian dualism, Rene Descartes, I think, therefore I am, that guy. So that's also part of the problem with our society now, is that it follows through this strain of philosophy. Do you know what the system of German idealism? People have been trying to finish it for centuries. I remember during 2016, there was this whole like big political fight, right, between the more like left woke S3W establishment and the right wing like frog Twitter people. You remember frog Twitter?
Not particularly. Like Pepe, the
That was-
frog?
Yeah, but that was like when the alt-right was a thing and they were trying to like appropriate that. They had like their little movement that was called like frog Twitter, and that was related to like Bronze Age pervert and like Logo Daedalus, like that guy posted a lot, Cantbot, like all these personalities basically that were affiliated with the alt-right back in 2016-17, and their big thing was like utilizing or like finishing the system of German idealism, which started with, well, not exactly Kant, but it goes through like Fichte and Hegel and like a bunch of these other guys. It has to do with this like dialectical unity of thoughts, of like the ideal way to structure reality in thought so that we can achieve like some sort of harmony or peace, or like solve these like hard problems of thinking and so on. And yeah, trying to explain like why the society that we live in today is fucked up. It's like, well, if we completed the system of thought, then we'll be able to like fix things and so on. It's kind of funny. But basically Kant and his philosophy developed out of a reaction to like Enlightenment, modernity thinking, and these other philosophers that were split between what was then seen as like the empiricist and rationalist perspectives, which it's a bit like idealism and materialism. Most simple way that I would explain it is maybe rationalism is putting primacy on the mind organizing reality and kind of like how the world of concepts determines like what we're going to see and be able to interact with and know about the truth of the world. Whereas empiricism is kind of like we can only rely on our sense data being like your incoming perception of light, of the environment, of space and time, and making predictable observations of things and noticing patterns.
Yeah.
So it's essentially like inductive method, right? You're kind of just looking at specifics and combining a bunch of specifics and then generalizing a sort of concept or mechanism or something from there. So that's like the more empiricist view of you only start with like the base sense and then you build up like the mind. Whereas rationalism is a bit more like you assume the mind is a certain way and then you can like deduce down to what the reality is that's being perceived as. So there's this kind of like conflict. It's also related to like Cartesian dualism, Rene Descartes, I think, therefore I am, that guy. So that's also part of the problem with our society now, is that it follows through this strain of philosophy into our modern world where we have something a bit like that. I think that most like even polite liberals and even like conservatives and stuff, sort of believe in something akin to mind-body dualism, right? Where there is a type of subjectivity or abstract like mental consciousness that exists for all humans. And then there's just like the physical bodies and worlds they inhabit. And those are like two separate spheres or realms somehow, right? So it's a dualist ontology. It sees that the reality of the world is made up of kind of two realms or sets of properties that aren't directly, they have some sort of correspondence or some sort of like relation or so on, but they can be set to like be separated somehow. And this is a problem for trans people, because what sort of happens is if you assume mind that is kind of a universal subjectivity and we just have different bodies, right? So that kind of implies that like, okay, if there's like a neutral soul, let's say it's like, you can think of the mind as like a soul. If there's only one universal type of soul, but people just have different bodies, then kind of implies that like, well, the mind can kind of determine like what the body is going to be doing. But in practice, and how it's turned out in our current world, is that like we observe the mechanisms of the body and then we use the mind to kind of optimize for that. And we end up like operating by what the body is like supposed to do. I'll get into this in a bit. But the mind-body dualism is this kind of separation of the two realms. And it has to do with philosophy through the Renaissance, Enlightenment, and like modernity, industrialization. This whole period was a stretch of philosophical developments. The German idealists were trying to create some synthesis of these different perspectives or takes to have a unified way of looking at the world that can encompass all of the truths and tell us everything we need to know about how everything should work. That's kind of always been the goal. So Kant was reacting to